From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Olumide Macaulay.
Hello and welcome. Tonight, police disrupt Revolution Now protests in some states and the FCT Abuja. Federal government set to acquire 12 additional Super Tucano fighter jets to fight insurgents. Edo State House of Assembly impeaches Deputy Speaker amidst party controversies. And rescue efforts continue in Beirut a day after explosion killed at least 135 people and injured over 4,000 others. Plus, business and news from Abuja, the FCT, and later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Lagos State Government reviews land use charge for residents, reverts to pre-2018 rates.
On sports news tonight, United States Tennis Association cuts the U.S. Open singles winners prize money from $3.85 million to $3 million.
And from Abuja, presidential panel probing EFCC activities under Ibrahim Magu rejects his plea for recorded proceedings, promises fair hearing.
It's a day of protests in some parts of the country as members of the Revolution Now movement took to the streets to demand what they call political revolution and a change in government. From Abuja to Lagos, Osun and Ondo, the protesters carried placards with different inscriptions to challenge the level of insecurity in the country and the growing unemployment, amongst others. While the protest was met with resistance by the police.
Solidarity songs, the usual bite for this gathering, expressing their resolve. Insecurity and unemployment top the list of reasons why they're calling for a change in government.
They are joined from our tertiary institutions and they join the colony of unemployed. We have made a position today, and that position is resounding and clear that the continuous affirmation in the Buhari administration must stop.
It started off as a peaceful protest, but not for long. With the police at the scene, the protesters dispersed, ending the protest abruptly, same way it did last year. Protesters gathered as early as 10 a.m. at the state capital Ikeja, but there was a pushback from the police. The action of the police was met with some resistance.
I have no right to disrupt a legitimate protest. We are a peaceful protester to march for our freedom. Revolution!
In the southwest state of Osun, the protesters are not in a large number, but their voice was loud enough to get the attention of authorities.
Victoria Santa! Victoria! Victoria! Victoria Santa!
The arrival of the men of the DSS threw the scene into chaos, with some protesters arrested. The founder of the Revolutionary Movement, Mr. Omoyele Sowore, is currently in a legal battle with the federal government after he was arrested last year for organizing a nationwide protest and calling for a revolution against the government, a move authorities have totally condemned.
Meanwhile, security is one of the concerns of the protesters, and this same issue is what the governor of Katsina State discussed with the president when they met at the villa today. Governor Aminu Masari is asking the country's leaders not to allow the insecurity in the northwestern and north-central states of the country to deteriorate to the level seen in the northeast. He was speaking to State House correspondents after a closed-door meeting with the President, Muhammadu Buhari, at the State House in Abuja. The governor, however, says efforts have been made to end banditry and other forms of criminality in the states. According to him, states in the northwest and north-central have vast forests and unfriendly terrain, especially during the rainy season, making it difficult to move heavy military equipment.
Currently, the military are in Katsina for the annual super camp. So over 2,000 of them are gathered in Katsina in order to really send signal to the bandits that the military is ready and willing, and they have the capability and the capacity to deal with the situation. And the hope is that the military, including the police and other security agencies, have been given a marching order. I have seen some of the headlines of today's papers. To control the situation, by all means, is a task that must be done, because we cannot allow a situation in Northwest to develop like it has in Northeast.
And the concerns raised by Governor Masari is also being corroborated by the United States, as it claims that Al-Qaeda insurgents have started penetrating the northwestern part of the country. The commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command in Africa, Dagvin Anderson, says it will continue to support the Nigerian government with intelligence sharing and what the terrorists are doing. He explains that this also includes supplying constant information on their operations in Borno State and the Northwest, where they are already making some inroad. Mr. Anderson said for international efforts to yield desired results in the fight against terrorism in Nigeria, the government must take the lead. And in what seems like a timely response, the federal government says it's set to acquire 12 additional Super Tucano fighter jets and other platforms that will aid the fight against terrorism. The Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, reaffirms the commitment of the force to exterminate insurgents in collaboration with other security agencies. He was speaking in Kainji, Niger State, after an operational visit to 407 Air Combat Training Group, where he assessed the state of facilities ahead of the arrival of the fighter jets.
We are expecting additional fighter aircrafts that have been paid by the federal government. So what we are simply doing now is to make sure that what is required on ground here is in place, so that when the aircraft comes in, we will have people that can really, be accommodated and have facilities that are required. And I'm referring specifically to the Super Tucano aircraft. We are satisfied with the level of work going on. Our reactivation efforts, you have seen the aircraft there, and also the engines that we have worked on our own with our people, and we are lucky that we are making progress. This base is going to be the base of one of the fighter aircraft that the federal government is acquiring for the Air Force. And that's why we had to look at the accommodation of those coming to assemble the aircraft and make sure that the aircraft is ready for operations. So,
staying with security, the military has been explaining its investigations on the attack on Governor Babagana Zulum's convoy last week. The coordinator of the Defense Information Operations, Major General John Eneche, told Channels Television that the allegation of sabotage by the governor is not true. General Eneche says the attack was from the enemy and not an act of sabotage from the military. He was a guest on our political program, Politics Today.
We investigated it immediately, and the strategic level is cleared of that. Operational level, cleared of that. Tactical level, cleared of that. Now, from the basics, I was interested and I took a cursory we analyzed the video, the scenery. Even from the gunshots, the way it all played out, you will discover from the sound of the gunshots is not the conventional weapons that we use. Now, it comes to doubt. Because from our training, from the basic training of weapon handling, you hear the sound of a gun. You could tell whether it is FN, whether it is Kalashnikov, whether it is G3, whether it's GPMG. And of course, if you have operated with an enemy for some time, we call it enemy habit. From the habit, from that analysis, estimate, it was purely that of the enemy in that area. And that was at the Boko Haram, the BHTs. From the tactics, from the maneuvers exhibited, it was theirs. And then from the search conducted, it was purely theirs. So our fears was allayed after 48 hours. So I can confidently tell the public that it is not anything sabotage from the tactical, operational, or strategic level. And that is if you want to range it from rank down to the person in the front line, the private, the soldier, the airman, there.
Away from security matters, reactions have continued to trail the revised NBC code. This time, a former Director General of the NTA, Professor Tony Redia, says the document cannot be viewed as a standard for the regulation of the broadcasting profession in the country. According to him, players in the industry were not given the opportunity for input into the code. Professor Redia made the point on our breakfast program, Sunrise Daily.
The code was supposed to be a professional guide. It was supposed to be a masterpiece that creates professional excellence in broadcasting. But now it is filled with sanctions and what you will do and what you will not do. And the bodies that should have been consulted were not consulted in the same way. Rather, they were being told that it is subject to review and that all their objections now will be taken into consideration in the next review. In which case, this particular edition was not exactly a broadcasting code for broadcasters, made by broadcasters for professionals. So, and that has been the problem, and I'm not surprised at the kind of headlines that are on today. Besides, there is a really problem. Everybody expects a broadcasting commission to be an autonomous body that has no place in politics. If you listen to the news that you have been putting on since, who is speaking? The Minister of Information. Is he the Director General of the NBC? You see, when the minister is speaking, there's no way broadcasters can see that the regulator is speaking. He's not a regulator. He should leave the broadcasters in the NBC to do their professional duty. And then the law gives him right to supervise them, but not to take over the job.
He also made reference to the issue of fake news, saying what constitutes hate speech is subjective.
Hate speech, they are very subjective terminologies, and one has to be very careful because some people will take criticism as hate speech. Criticism is not hate speech. It is when somebody is saying something that is really defamatory and all of that you can say is wrong. Even at that, the laws are there. Even the old defamation law of 1961 is still valid today. It has not been abrogated. The provisions are there for what you say. When what a station is saying is true, you cannot be saying you are defamed because the truth cannot defame you. If somebody is saying the truth, it cannot be defamatory. I think that we have to also know that in terms of deterrence, which the minister spoke about, there is nothing to show that people will be deterred. We are assuming that the only medium where people can do fake news or where people can do hate speech is broadcasting. It's not so. Politics is on now in 2 states. People are doing all kinds of hate speeches and fake news in rallies. Not even on the screen, in rallies. And people are hearing them. Are those ones not fake news? Are those ones not hate speech? What is the fine for that?
In part 2, after the break, All Progressives Congress seeks more women participation in Edo State as PDP takes governorship campaign to Esako. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the News at 10 live on Channels Television, Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Police disrupt Police Revolution Now protests in some states and the FCT Abuja. Federal government set to acquire 12 additional Super Tucano fighter jets to fight insurgents. Edo State House of Assembly impeaches Deputy Speaker amidst party controversies. And rescue efforts continue in Beirut, a day after explosion killed at least 135 people and injured over 4,000 others. Website channelstv.com has more information on our top stories and others. Please subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. To politics in Edo State, the Deputy Speaker of the Edo State House of Assembly, Mr. Yekini Ediaye, has been impeached by his colleagues in the State Assembly. His impeachment is coming less than 48 hours after he led 4 other lawmakers to endorse the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Pastor Osagie Ezeyamu, ahead of next month's governorship election. The lawmakers immediately elected Mr. Roland Aso, representing Orianwo 2 constituency, as the new Deputy Speaker. As part of its campaigns for the Edo governorship election, the Ezeyamu Campaign Organization is promising to ensure that women get adequate representation in government appointments if elected into office. This promise was made during a sensitization meeting for APC members in the 12 wards of Oredo local government area in Benin City, the state capital.
The call for more women participation in the nation's electoral process is not a new one. It's on this background that the APC seeks to change the narrative in the forthcoming Edo governorship election. The party is out to sensitize its women wing in the 12 wards of Oredo local government area on the importance of their active participation in the September 19th governorship election in Edo State.
My women, we are our mothers. You know, any picking when woman carry for back, you know they follow. So make we join hands, make we carry them for back, make them not fall, so that we will reach Osadebe Avenue. By His grace.
The organizers also believe that women stand better chances in governance if the APC and its candidate, Pastor Osagie Ezeyamu, is given a chance to lead the state.
The women take the brunt of the insecurity in the place. And when you talk about welfare, the men can always go out to work, but the women require social welfare. That they are even the one bearing the children, looking after the children at home. If you quantify what they are doing at home, it's more than what you men do in the office, and you earn so much. So Pastor Ezeyamu has promised to really take the issue of social welfare very seriously, because it's the women that it affects.
Women of Oredo came out en masse to show their support for Pastor Osagie Ezeyamu, to show that they like the simple agenda of Pastor Ezeyamu, our APC candidate, and by the grace of God, the incoming governor of Edo State.
According to the APC, events like this one will be replicated in all the local government areas of Edo State before the election in order to ensure that women truly determine the outcome of the election owing to their numbers.
Meanwhile, the Edo State Governor, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, has warned against disregarding coronavirus preventive guidelines during this campaign season while sounding confident of victory. He insists winning the September 19th Edo governorship election should not come at any cost. Mr. Obaseki was addressing supporters in Isako East local government as the People's Democratic Party campaign trail moves across wards and local governments in Edo State.
Esako East local government area is the second local government on the itinerary of the PDP. The campaign team arrives Ward 4 in Agenebode to solicit support for the re-election bid of Governor Godwin Obaseki and his deputy Philip Shaibu. Just like in the previous wards visited, the PDP promises a greater Edo State if given the votes at the governorship polls.
The governor is not only doing well, it will continue to work for the improvement of our state.
Next on stage is the man at the center of the event, Governor Godwin Obaseki. Mr. Obaseki commits to more projects for the people. While reveling in the large turnout at the rally so far, Governor Obaseki is still mindful of the dangers posed by the COVID-19 pandemic.
When at a complex like this, they could not get this thing. Mask. If you don't get mask, put handkerchief. Take cover your mouth and nose. Because when you cover like that, even if you get, it's not going to affect another person. If the other person gets, it's not going to affect you. At least, now, when you dey outside where people dey, now you go use them. When you reach your house, you remove them. When I hear, I love you, so I want you to be safe. I want you to be alive, so that after September 19, when una don't swear us in, una go there, make una enjoy wetin PDP go do for now.
A member of the PDP campaign council, Raymond Dokpesi, is on home soil. He pledges support on behalf of the supporters.
Ward 1 has 8,500 registered voters. I have promised my brother, the chairman, 8,000 votes out of the 8,500.
It's all in a day's job for the Obaseki Shaibu campaign team. There were visits to the traditional rulers in the area.
From Edo State, we move to Rivers State, where Governor Nyesom Wike has directed the removal of the Joint Account Allocation Committee from banks that gave unauthorized loans to some local government chairmen in the state. Governor Wike gave the directive while swearing in the substantive chairman of Asari Toro local government area at Government House, Port Harcourt. He also directed the State Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice to take legal action against the defaulting banks. He notes that the banks cannot seek refund of the loans because they contravened extant laws of the state.
This is the first time through election a woman is becoming a chairman, not caretaker committee. So you're the first. So utilize the opportunity and make a difference. And in picking your deputy, you have to make sure you do quite wide consultation and with the party. That is very, very important. But I hear that the former chairman took loan of about 200 million, 100 million from Zenith Bank or what. We have taken a decision yesterday that all those loans, all those banks that gave loan to local government without our approval, the accounts of those local government must leave the banks. And I've told Attorney General to take necessary steps that the bank cannot go seek for the fund from the local government. When you contravene the law, you suffer for it. But since you have not spent their money from what I had, you have to call the bank to take back their money.
And reporting from our studios in Abuja is Linda Ahigbe. Hello, Linda.
Hello, Lumide. Now we begin with the presidency. The Justice Salami-led presidential panel investigation of the activities of the EFCC under its suspended acting chairman, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, resumed today. Mr. Magu is being investigated over alleged mismanagement of recovered assets by the EFCC between May 2015 and May 2020, a process triggered by allegations against him by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami. Sources close to the presidential panel told Channels Television that at today's proceeding, the panel promised to give Mr. Magu fair hearing in the process of investigating the allegations leveled against him. Mr. Magu is said to have requested that the proceeding be documented on video or recorded, but his request was turned down, noting that the venue of the sitting is temporary and therefore it is impossible to install video recording equipment. It, however, promised that they will be fair in their approach and conduct of what they describe as a fact-finding mission and not a trial. He has since denied all allegations leveled against him. The enforcement of sanctions for non-compliance with COVID-19 quarantine regulations remains one of the major challenges facing the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 in its battle to flatten the curve of the pandemic. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman of the PTF, Mr. Boss Mustafa, mentioned this today after the committee submitted its report on the last phase of the eased lockdown to President Buhari. He explains that the president is yet to assent to the recommendations in the report, so it will be premature for him to discuss the details. The PTF chairman further explains that the recommendations are driven by the three thematic areas of movement, labor and industry, and community activities.
Doesn't have any mobile court. It's the responsibilities of the subnationals. And most of them have signed the quarantine laws in their states. And within those quarantine laws, where they have prescribed penalties for appearing in public spaces without masks, there is a sanction. It's the enforcement that has largely been lacking. And my appeal is that the subnationals should ensure enforcement. As a matter of fact, when we listed some of our challenges, that was one of it. It was top. Lack of enforcement of even the regulations that have been put in place as a result of signing the quarantine regulation. It's a regulation, it's a law. But you see, the issue of enforcement has been lacking. And it's not only in this area, in so many areas. And like I keep saying most times, that COVID-19 has exposed the weaknesses of our systems. All systems, not only the Nigerian system, even the American system, its inadequacies in spite of its 300 years of democracy have been exposed by COVID-19. So I believe that if we can just work on the enforcement aspect of it, which is the responsibility of the subnationals, we would go a long way.
The governor of Ekiti State, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, has been sharing his experience after his recovery from COVID-19, and he wants everyone to know that the virus is not a death sentence. He appeals to doctors in employment of the state government who have been on strike in the last 1 month to sheath their sword so as not to provoke government into imposing some strict rules. He announces that worship centers will resume activities in the state next week, having convinced him on their readiness to abide by prescribed protocols. When the news at 10 returns, Lagos State government officials visit family of 27-year-old Chidinma Ajoku, killed by an unlatched container-laden truck. Join us again.
Welcome back. The Lagos State government has paid a visit to the family of Chidinma Ajoku, the 27-year-old lady killed in an accident involving an unlatched container-laden truck. The State Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice, Oyosore Onigwanjo, accompanied by some top officials from the State Ministry of Justice, visited the family today on behalf of the state government. They were received by Chidinma's mom, Chineze Ajoku. The Attorney General told the late Chidinma's mother that the state governor is doing everything to ensure that those responsible for the incident are arrested, prosecuted, and that the family gets justice.
The Lagos State Executive Council meeting every Monday. We've discussed it twice. The governor was so upset. He said that in that law we are currently amending, that we should ensure that containers that are not latched, that if they then, fall off the trailer and injure anybody or damage any property, we will hold the owners of that container responsible, in addition to the owners of the truck and the driver. So we are going to add that to the amendments which we are proposing to the Lagos State House of Assembly, in order to, ensure that this is because it's happened not once, not twice. But if we will use this incident to ensure that going forward it doesn't happen, and whoever does it again, the law will adequately be in a position for them to be dealt with appropriately. When we eventually charge them, if you want to send representatives to court, we will let you know. Then the court is sitting if you want to come or you want to send somebody. You can be sure. I would also handle the matter personally to show you how seriously we take the matter.
To the aviation industry, following the massive sack of pilots and engineers by Bristow Helicopters and Air Peace Airlines, the National Association of Aircraft Pilots and Engineers has asked the relevant agencies of government to intervene in the matter in 2 weeks or face the withdrawal of industry services by these critical personnel. The national president of the NAAPE also asked the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to immediately ground all activities of Air Peace and Bristow Helicopters over the sack, as the action did not follow due process.
If call for the airline to retract, that's to go back to pre-COVID salary so that they will be negotiated and resolved amicably. And we are calling on government to release the palliative. We are also asking NCA to make sure that some of these airlines that are airing, they should be called to order. If they refuse, they should be grounded. But most importantly, we are giving them 2 weeks for the relevant government agencies to intervene. Ministry of Labour, Ministry of Aviation, NCA, and name it, National Assembly and the federal government, to quickly intervene in the industry before it is too late. And we are going to go on strike after if nothing is done within 2 weeks. We are going to call on all aircraft pilots and engineers in the industry to withdraw their service.
To the House of Representatives, who say it will petition President Muhammadu Buhari over the refusal of some agencies of government to appear before its Committee on Public Accounts to answer questions over financial irregularities traced to them or clarify some records provided by other agencies. The House Committee on Public Accounts lists the Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, Group Managing Director of Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, Mele Kyari, Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority, Hadiza Bala Usman, the Bureau for Public Enterprises, National Emergency Management Agency, and Petroleum Equalization Fund as those who have turned down their invitation to explain their position over the sale of federal government landed property nationwide. The chairman of the committee, Wole Oke, has directed the clerk to forward a petition to the president through the Office of the Secretary to the Federation and Chief of Staff to the President, informing him of the refusal of the heads of the said agencies to honor the invitation of Parliament, adding that the President shall compel them to honor the invitation of the House within 7 days. And now we'll turn our attention to business news. Here's Anne Wanwodo.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Olumide. Hello and welcome to Business News. The Lagos State Government has reviewed the Land Use Charge law by reversing the rate of pre-2018 while upholding the 2018 method of valuation. The State Commissioner for Finance, Mr. Rabiu Olowo, who made this known at a press briefing, says that property owners and occupied by a pensioner is exempted from paying the land use charge. Occupied residential property, vacant properties, and open empty land are all expected to pay the same amount of money before its amendment. Mr. Olowo also announced a waiver on penalties for outstanding land use charge payment for the year 2017 and 2018 for property owners in the state. The European Investment Bank and the African Export-Import Bank have donated 300 million euros funds for Africa to support the resilience and the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the bank explains that 200 million euros of that fund, which was previously allocated to trade-related investment, will be directed specifically to sectors most impacted by the pandemic, with additional 100 million euros, making it the first accelerated COVID-19 response for the entire sub-Saharan region under the EIB's Team Europe initiative. And 2 days after announcing a planned sale of all its stake in its Nigerian subsidiary, South Africa grocery retailer ShopRite Holdings has already planned to close its store in Kenya just less than 1 year after its opening and layoff of 115 staff. In a letter addressed to the Kenyan Union of Commercial Food and Allied Workers, ShopRite said it will close its City Mall store in Mombasa and it's evaluating all of its operations across Africa based on current and future performance. The retail giant has been reviewing its long-term options in Africa as currency devaluations, supply issues and low consumer spending in Nigeria, Angola and Zambia have all reduced its earnings. Meanwhile, South African telecoms giant MTN Group says that it is planning to sell part of or even all its $243 million interest in online retailer Jumia Technologies as it seeks to pay down debts and enter new markets. The telco, which had previously marked Jumia as a non-core business, is now reviving plans for the sale after Jumia's shares surged 142% this year, recovering from a dip in 2019. MTN Group has been disposing of its non-core assets as part of its strategy to reduce debt and drive future growth. Meanwhile, reports say no final decision about the sale has been made public. Airtel Africa PLC and Telkom Kenya Limited say that they are no longer pursuing the completion of a merger talk announced last year. In a statement sent to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Airtel Africa says the joint venture partnership had faced challenges in getting approval that has now forced the firm to seek alternative strategic options. In February last year, both telcos agreed to combine their businesses in Kenya, all in a bid to create an integrated telecommunication platform, which is subject to various conditions, including regulatory approvals. And now let's head to the Nigerian stock market, where Ekaite Afia gives us details of today's trading figures.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Nigeria's stock market continues its winning streak for a third consecutive day in the week as investors sustain their interest in fundamentally sound and viable stocks on the NSE. Now, this comes as volumes of shares traded today increased by more than 60% when compared with Tuesday's figures to 383.28 million units in over 3,860 deals. And these were largely driven by the shares of UACN, FBN Holdings, and Access Bank. However, sectoral activity was nearly flat across board, except for the oil and gas as well as the banking sector, while mid-cap equities were the lead contributors to the 20 billion naira gain that was recorded today. The shares of CAP, UAC Properties, and GlaxoSmithKline are among top 18 gainers, while Eternal Oil, Livestock Feeds, and Mutual Benefit lead 9 other losers for Wednesday. That's all for the Stock Market Report. I'm Ekaite Afia.
Thanks a lot, Ekaite. Meanwhile, major stock markets have also ended today's trading session mostly positive amid uncertainty over U.S. COVID-19 relief package and string of latest corporate earnings result. Let's check out the closing figures for today. And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. The rest of News at 10 continues now with Olumide.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial star 894 hash now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Anne. Still ahead on the news at 10. Rescue efforts continue in Beirut a day after explosion killed at least 135 people and injured over 4,000 others. Plus, More stories from our London studio on Around the World in 5. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the news at 10. At least 135 people have died in the explosion that rocked the Lebanese capital Beirut on Tuesday, and the government has placed a number of port officials under house arrest as it investigates the incident. Meanwhile, as many as 300,000 people will be needing new homes as the country continues to count costs of the explosion. Here's Simon Pusey with more in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Rescue workers in Lebanon are searching for more than 100 people after a huge explosion killed at least 100 and injured more than 4,000 people in the capital Beirut. This footage shows the scale of the damage to the foundations of buildings, with rubble piling up in the streets, damaged cars and overturned furniture inside homes. The governor of Beirut has said that around 300,000 people have been left homeless. The explosion caused a column of smoke to rise from the port, followed by an enormous blast. Filming the incident from the high buildings 2 kilometers from the port were thrown backwards by the shock. The explosion was so strong that it was felt as far away as Cyprus, hundreds of kilometers away, and registered as a 3.3 magnitude earthquake in the Lebanese capital. This video shows a bride posing for photographs on her wedding day, meant to be the happiest day of her life. Then this. The cause of the blast remains unclear, although the president says it was likely caused by the 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that has been stored unsafely in a warehouse since 2014. Officials have said they expect the death toll to rise further as emergency workers dig through rubble to rescue people and remove the dead. An emergency cabinet meeting has been called and a 2-week state of emergency has been declared. Australia's Victoria state has reported a record rise in COVID-19 cases and deaths as it prepares to close much of its economy to control a second wave of infections that threatens to spread across the country. The second most populous state in Australia has reported a daily high of 725 new virus infections and a record 15 deaths despite having reimposed a lockdown on Melbourne, the state capital with a population of 5 million people 4 weeks ago.
I'm so grateful and so proud to think that Victorians are dealing with this challenge, a bigger challenge than we have perhaps ever faced. And they're doing it with a sense of compassion, a sense of care for each other, a sense of concern, of course, but that really clear understanding that we are all in this together and that decisions that each and every one of us make as individuals, as families, as communities, they have an impact on all of us.
Meanwhile, in Greece, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has blamed complacency for the country's significant rise in coronavirus cases in recent days. The government has repeatedly warned it will reintroduce restrictions, including local lockdowns, if it needs to. South Africa's health minister has said the country might be over its recent surge of coronavirus cases by the end of August, but he warned that the risk of a second wave of the coronavirus pandemic still remains and containment measures must continue to be imposed. Meanwhile, solidarity walks have been held across Pakistan as the country observed Day of Exploitation in Kashmir to mark the first anniversary of India's scrapping of Kashmir's autonomy. Addressing a rally in the capital city, Islamabad, Pakistan's president condemned Indian Kashmir's change of status and demanded that the changes made in Indian Kashmir in violation of the UN resolutions and the Geneva Convention should be reversed. The Indian government stripped Jammu and Kashmir, its only Muslim-majority state, of its special rights last August. In South Korea, at least 15 people have died and more than 1,500 have been forced from their homes after torrential rain continued to trigger floods and landslides. Prime Minister Chung Sai-kyun has called for 2 areas to be declared disaster zones after 42 consecutive days of rain, the country's longest monsoon in 7 years. The rescue effort has been complicated by coronavirus restrictions, with fears that crowded shelters could spread the virus. A prize-winning Zimbabwean novelist and filmmaker has been arrested at recent protests where she accused President Emerson Mnangagwa's government of holding its people in a repressive chokehold as they endured an economic emergency. She was bundled into a police truck and was charged with breaking the COVID-19 lockdown to hold an illegal gathering. Bailed pending trial after a night in jail, the 61-year-old said she could not keep quiet while neglect and mismanagement left Zimbabweans unable to afford a decent meal and healthcare. And finally, Indonesia has released 25 turtles into the ocean after the endangered animals were recovered during a raid on poachers last month. The turtles were part of some 36 green turtles rescued in mid-July from illegal traffickers. Another 11 are set to be released back into their natural habitat on Sunday. That's according to the Agency for Conservation of Natural Resources of Bali. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. And now it's time for sports news. Here's Ayotunde Balogun.
Many thanks, Olumide. The United States Tennis Association, the USTA, has announced that U.S. Open singles winners will receive $850,000 less prize money this year. The U.S. Tennis Association said the $53.4 million total prize pool is down from last year's $57 million pool owing to the financial crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Singles winners will receive $3 million, down from $3.85 million in 2019. Runners-up will receive $1.5 million, down from $1.9 million the year before. Russia's Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova has confirmed that she will not take part in the US Open as organizers could not guarantee her health and safety amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The US Open is set to be played from August the 31st to September the 12th in New York. The 29-year-old joins defending champion Rafa Nadal and women's world number 1 Ash Barty, who pulled out of the Grand Slam out of fear of contracting the virus during their stay in the US. Meanwhile, Rafa Nadal says he still intends to play at the French Open next month and remains hopeful it will go ahead despite withdrawing from the US Open owing to the COVID-19 concerns. Now, the Spaniard's withdrawal was confirmed shortly after the Madrid Open was cancelled on Tuesday, with the rising cases in Europe raising doubts around other events, including the French Open, which is due to start in Paris on September the 27th. The 34-year-old insists the US Open will not carry an asterisk without its defending men's champion.
I will be preparing myself for the tournament, for the play in Europe. Then, when the moment arrives, I'm going to take my personal decisions, depending how the situation is or how not. Then when the moment arrives, let's take a look about how the situation is around Europe, if everything is under control or not, and then I'm going to make my personal decision.
Arsenal Football Club have announced they are proposing 55 staff redundancies as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to impact the Gunners' finances. The English FA Cup champions cited revenue from broadcasters, matchday and commercial activities, which have also been disrupted and will continue to have a negative impact ahead of the 2020-2021 campaign. The North London club confirmed that investment in the first-team squad is a key priority for the team and that the 30-day consultation period will begin to determine those redundancies. Clubs in next season's European competitions could be forced to forfeit games if they fail to inform UEFA of travel restrictions in place to curb the spread of coronavirus, according to guidelines issued by the European football governing body, UEFA. UEFA explained that it will publish a list of known travel restrictions between countries before each draw is made. Clubs will then have to inform UEFA of any other unknown restrictions at least 48 hours before the draw, failing which they will be handed a 3-0 defeat. And the Court of Arbitration for Sportcast has postponed Cardiff's appeal hearing in the Emiliano Salas case for a second time and did not say when it will hold. The Welsh Football Club was summoned by FIFA in October of 2019 to pay the first draft of $8.3 million that it owed French side FC Nantes, a former owner of the Argentinian forward who died in a plane crash in January 2019. In November of 2019, the World Football Governing Body ruled that Cardiff FC will be banned from signing for 3 players if it does not pay within 45 days. And that's a wrap on Sports News. I'm Ayotunde Balu.
Thank you, Ayo. And the main news again. Police and other security agencies today disrupted the Revolution Now protests in some states across the country and Abuja. The protesters took to the streets to demand what they call political revolution and a change in government. Also today, the federal government announced it will acquire 12 additional Super Tucano fighter jets to intensify the fight against insurgents. And rescue efforts continue in Beirut today after Wednesday's explosion killed at least 135 people and injured over 4,000 others. Meanwhile, some Beirut port officials have been placed under house arrest, pending investigations into the explosion. That's it on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Olumide McCall.